Also, when you've been for any reflections on the passing away of Luang, like after the monk reflects when a great teacher dies.
Sankhara ไม่เที่ยง Sankhara ไม่เที่ยง means formations are impermanent. Formations means body, mind, five khandhas are impermanent. So even the greatest teacher dies just like everyone else. Their life comes to an end. If you go to the cremation of a teacher such as that, then you're getting involved with the contemplation of impermanence. All formations, physical, mental, are impermanent. That's the contemplation. The heart of the matter is the experience. Take the experience of impermanence into your heart through the practice, through the contemplation. All the other aspects of a funeral, the ceremonies and that are superficial and extraneous. And you reflect that all physical formations, materiality is of the nature to age, to arise and pass away. You bring that reflection into your own mind. You consider, well, even a great teacher, one who's practiced well, practiced appropriately, they still have a body, they still are subject to impermanence. And then you realise, I must also go the same way. I'm impermanent. This body of mine is impermanent. So you take these reflections and bring them inwards. The purpose of all the ritual, the ceremony, the chanting is to bring us to recollect on truth. So chanting the matika, chants, funeral chants, they're bringing up the reflection on impermanence, which we should bring into our mind. And all the rituals, ceremonies, the customs that have grown up around funerals, the purpose is always to bring us back to the Dhamma. So like chanting, the original purpose of having chanting is to explain Dhamma to us, to teach us the Dhamma. From those words, the Pali words that are chanted, they're explaining the truth. We have to bring that into our mind and say, well, this is the way things are. Things arise and pass away. This is the way things are. If you didn't have any ritual, any ceremony at all, well, a lot of people would just forget the truth. You could say it's superficial, but it still has a value in the sense that it brings people together and gets them to reflect on the truth of impermanence in different ways. That's the value of these kind of rituals, or the ritualization of a funeral. Another part of the ceremony is what we call chak pangsakula. Pangsakula is like discarded cloth, something that is old, unwanted, ugly. We have the offering of pangsakula cloth, or the taking up of pangsakula cloth. There's another reflection, isn't it? It's a reflection on the fact that all things go towards decline and degeneration. That cloth, pangsakula cloth, was once new, bright, good-looking cloth. It becomes old, people discard it. Traditionally they discard it, just leave it on a tree or wrap a corpse in it. Then monks come along and take it. That's another reflection, isn't it? It's a ceremony, but it's also a reflection teaching us about impermanence. rituals and ceremonies have their use for bringing people together. It's a skillful means to get them to think of the Dhamma, the truth about the way things are, about life. Through these different ceremonies, it's a chance for people to do that. The danger is that they become extravagant or overblown, and people lose track or lose awareness of the real meaning of the whole thing, and they get caught up into the superficiality of the ceremony, the grandeur of it, the material side of it. That's the danger. So for instance, this morning the lay people were saying already 40 million baht has been offered since Luang died. People have practiced generosity offer 40 million baht, which is true, but the danger is people get attached, just to the number of the figure of the money and that side of things. Again, they're no longer thinking about the impermanence of life and the sort of the deeper truth. They're just thinking more of a lot of money, maybe. And so you can see how the kilesas can take over. Lapa, sakara, it's gains and wealth that might accumulate into the sangha at this time. If one's not careful, that becomes a source for attachment, craving, and one completely forgets the actual impermanence of life. One is just caught up in that part of it, the superficial side of it, and the gains to be had, and all of that side of it. It's rather going the way of getting attached to these sort of external parts of the funeral, the extravagance, the gains, the wealth, those sort of things. As monks, we should be developing the object of viraka, abandoning lust, the mood, the object in the mind of abandoning lustful attachment, sensuality. That tendency towards becoming attracted to the world, indulging in the world, giving in to sensual craving for the things of the world. That's the mood we have to maintain through this sort of an occasion. If there's a lot of people, a lot of things happening, doesn't matter, the mood to keep is one of viraka, so that one has a chance to actually counter one's kilesas, let go of attachment, free the mind from those sort of fetters that keep us bound to the world. When we get too attached to sensuality, we become intoxicated, and then it can lead to decline and degeneration in people's behaviour, inappropriate behaviour, particularly for monks, can lead to not keeping the Vinaya perhaps. So we have to be very careful.
Sorry, Ajahn. Last weekend on Saturday, Liem was saying about talking about developing something within for the long term, like meditation practice. And I find that when, like say I came here, I've been here for 10 days. First couple of days my mind calms down, but then it kind of just slowly seems kind of on the same level, just like very slowly calming. Does that keep continuing into the future? Like if I maintain the practice, because I'm a bit sporadic with it. Like if I maintain it, does it slowly just keep trending towards more calm and more stillness? Or because sometimes I'll do it for a few months and it gets good, and then I just get bored with it, drop it. So I was inspired by that talk to do it more long term. But should I just let go of all expectations and assume it will just grow? Or?
It says, don't let peacefulness delude you, in the sense that it can become an attachment in itself. We build it up into something in our mind that's, I've got to attain peace of mind or hold on to peace of mind. Then it can become a source of suffering. So just observe it for what it is. If you have a state of mind that is peaceful, just know that it's peaceful. If it's not peaceful, know that. and try to see it. It's something that arises through natural conditions, and it's a natural state of mind. When the conditions are present, the mind is peaceful. Try not to let a sense of self form around it, attachment to it, because then it becomes an issue that, I'm peaceful, I'm not peaceful, and it will cause all kinds of further issues to arise, and it can be a cause of suffering.
So then have no goal of any state of mind, really. Just, if anything, it's to just be with the breath right now, and that's it.
Your aim of your practice is to maintain mindfulness, the knowing, the quality of knowing at all times in the present moment. So whatever is arising, make that the focus of your awareness in whatever's arising in your experience. Know that for what it is, without grasping, without attaching. If you bring in desire to the practice, then it will cause suffering, and it will change that mode. You'll no longer be knowing the truth of things. You'll be caught into the desire and proliferation that comes from that. And if that happens, you keep falling into desire, then your practice tends to become one of a self. I am practicing, my practice is good, my practice is not good. We start attaching to the sense of self, and it becomes conceit. And then you have comparing with others, or I've got something from my practice better than him, or my practice is not so good, worse than him. And it becomes attachment, becomes conceit, and you're going away from just this pure knowing. And that's the aim of your practice, just develop this pure knowing without the sense of self, without attachment. And equality, he says, upekkha, equanimity. If there's this quality of knowing without creating self out of it, well, it's just equanimity, cool, calm, balanced awareness.
Can I just get my question quickly? I just wanted to ask Paul what the very basics of Luang Por Chah's, the fundamental practices that he would encourage monks or anybody.
Luang Por began his answer saying, the question was, what are the basic teachings Ajahn Chah gave? He said, to have nothing or be nothing, non-attachment, letting go of conceit, letting go of self-view. Usually in the old days when a Akanduka bhikkhu arrived, a visiting bhikkhu arrived at the monastery, they would allow him to stay on probation for a period of time to see how he practiced, how his behaviour was, to see if it would fit with the standard of Dhamma Vinaya that was practiced at Wat Pong. I myself, Luang Por, arrived as an Akanduka monk. I hadn't, strictly speaking, hadn't planned to go to Wat Pong, but through a series of events I ended up coming there. When I arrived, the resident monks prepared me a place in the old sala, the very first sala that they had there. It's quite a small building. Just a place in the corner of the sala, a mat to sleep on. There's 3 sets of bones, human bones, hanging up for contemplation in that building. Normally you might be afraid to stay in a place like that. Somebody who hasn't had much to do with corpses would bring up fear, sense of being uncomfortable. So I did just kind of slightly raise my concerns at first, but nothing too serious. I spent 2 nights in that building and then requested to stay the Vasa and to study and practice with Luang Por Chah. So he said, well, if you're to do that, you'll need some form of ID, like a letter from your teacher, some kind of guarantee or sponsorship. So that was the condition. And then he continued on to teach me about the Brahmavihara Dhammas, the 4 Brahmavihara Dhammas. He taught that these Usually we say these are the dhammas of an adult or a mature person. But he then went on to say that the deeper meaning in terms of Dhamma is that they're the Dhammas, the qualities of one who is beyond the asavas, the kilesas. So they're the qualities of apamanya Dhamma, they're the boundless qualities of the pure mind. So I listened and understood what he was talking about. I was already familiar with this kind of teaching. Practicing those first few nights in the sala, I found it very peaceful. I was alone, so it was quite convenient for the practice. It was quiet, so I didn't have any real suffering. There's only 2 toilets in the whole monastery in those days, and they're about 200 meters away from the sala. So you'd have to go out, walk quite a long way to go to the toilet. It was a strange place. But I was used to staying in the forest previously, so I wasn't scared, say, by the sound of the animals. There were civet cats and things jumping around in the trees on the roofs. This didn't worry me because I'd already spent time in the forest, and I just took it as part of my practice of Gaya Gata Sati. And I was also familiar with the contemplation of a supa. I already used that in my practice, so to see skeletons hanging up wasn't a problem. So I could see that Wat Pong was actually a very suitable place to practice. It was quiet, the monks were restrained, secluded. There are very few lay people around, sort of passing through. It was just a very quiet, suitable place to practice. So after that initial stay, I had to go back to the original monastery where I had been studying, to get a letter from my teacher there, who recommended me to Luang Por Chah, gave me the permission to leave to come and study with Luang Por Chah. So on returning with this letter, then he allowed me to stay on. Luang Por says when he first arrived for that first pansa, he arrived in July, just before entering the rains. Ajahn Mahasupong, Ajahn Mahasamran were 2 other now deceased senior monks who arrived at the same time. Luang Por Si, who's perhaps the most senior of Ajahn Chah's disciples still alive, he arrived after Luang Por Liem, but the same year. In those days everybody took the training very seriously. There was relatively little socializing. The forest was very quiet, peaceful, so a suitable place. All the supportive conditions for developing the practice were quite good. There were regular meetings for meditation and chanting, morning, evening. I didn't know anyone at first, so I didn't take much interest in mixing and socializing. I saw my main responsibility as to put effort into the practice. That was my duty. After about one week there, Luang Por Chah asked me about my borikan, my requisites, to see how I'd received them, how I'd come by them, whether it was appropriate, whether it was according to the Vinaya. And I had actually kept the Vinaya, I hadn't obtained my requisites in an inappropriate way. But the way they looked didn't look quite the same as the monks at Wat Pong. I had made them from very strong, thick village cloth and so on. So Luang Por Chah made a comment. He said, these requisites, these robes don't look appropriate for a samana. You'll have to give them up. He was probably testing me to see if I was attached to my own set of robes and bowls. So like most visiting Akanduka monks, he made me change it all, and I gained a new set of requisites from the other monks. These were Bangsakula robes, robes left over from other people, or even had originally come from corpse cloth. So I boiled it all in water to make sure that they were clean, free from germs. And these 3 robes, new robes that I got, although they weren't new cloth, they were old cloth, they looked better than before, but then I still reflected, well, even you put them onto this body, the body always makes them dirty, so that you never have anything you could say is perfect or perfectly clean, because the body is always getting your robes dirty. I also had one bowl, one water kettle, and a cup that I made from something I found in the forest. Didn't say what. The Sainasana they arranged for me was one of the oldest, sort of most simple kutis, right far away from the toilet, a long way to walk. Obviously a kuti nobody really wanted to stay in. Those who had previously stayed in it hadn't bothered to maintain it very well, obviously not that interested in it, so it wasn't a particularly good quality kuti.